Okay, I figure I should like, actually do something while I talk, because I'm just talking. Okay, so part 3, I know what I'm gonna do actually, is own root versus grafted roses. Now, I'm gonna be really honest about this conversation in many ways, okay? And nothing I say is to disparage another provider, rosebush provider, anything like that. This all just comes from my opinion and my experience. Now, you have to take into consideration that my opinion comes from a zone 9 and 10 gardener. In zone 9 and 10, we almost never experience dieback, which is like when the canes turn black in the winter, because we don't have inclement weather here. The most inclement weather we have is a lot of wind, and wind can dry out canes, and sometimes we can have a little dieback from that. But in general, like, we don't see dieback. So for me, I have honestly never cared if my roses are own root or grafted. Now, grafted roses. So grafted roses have been the traditional way that the big rose growers, meaning the rose bush growers, like Weeks and David Austin and Starred, Certified, they have propagated their roses, because grafted roses, it's a 2-part thing, right? So you plant the rootstock in the ground and it roots, and several months later you come around. So typically they plant in like December, at least this is what my partner does, and then they're grafting in early April. And I will be there in April to show you our grafting. And they are grafted in April, so the rootstock has about 3 to 4 months to root, and then they graft onto it with the variety, the intended variety above the ground, and that plant has the added benefit of already having an established root system, right? And then that bud eye that's grafted onto the rootstock is just gonna push and grow for about 18 months in the field. They graft around April, they grow that whole year, so they'll grow from April 23 to April 24, and then they'll be pulled out in November of 24. So it's about an 18-month grow. They say 2 year, because technically the rootstock is in the ground too. And you have a really pretty big, robust plant by then. Because rootstock is chosen in general because it is a very vigorous, hardy type of rose, right? So the only types of rootstock that are really offered, which we use Dr. Huey here, is because Dr. Huey is a very vigorous rose and it grows well, right? So those roots are gonna be really powerful, and they're gonna push a whole lot of energy up into that grafted bud eye and push that plant out, and you're gonna get a pretty sizable, healthy plant right from the get-go. And a lot of gardeners are into own root roses right now. Own root is kind of like a trend that, I'm not saying it's a trend that's gonna go out of style, but it's become a very common phrase, common request amongst rose gardeners. Own root roses are grown from a cutting. So quite literally, I'm gonna salvage a rose that is on its way out here. Not salvage, I'm gonna destroy. So quite literally, the grower will take a cutting. Let me cut off this end here. They will take a cutting, pretend this is a rose bush, right? They're gonna take a cutting off their rose bush, generally a harder cutting, like a thicker cutting, and they're gonna, there's a node there, bud eyes are right there. They're gonna cut this cutting and they're gonna root it. And so they're gonna stick it in a pot, like a tiny little band or a gallon, whatever it is. I don't know if, I know some of them finish in gallons. I don't know if they start in gallons. They may start in smaller, for propagation, they may start in much, much smaller units. Like when we propagated before, I propagated old roses and I started in these like little jiffy, they're called like jiffy packs, and they're basically like a peat moss kind of material. You're gonna just put rooting powder or rooting substance on that cutting, stick it in there, and that cutting is gonna root, hopefully, right? It's gonna grow roots, and this is gonna become your rose bush. Like quite literally, this will become your rose bush. So first thing it's gonna do, it's gonna root, and then these nodes here are gonna start pushing out new growth, and you're gonna have a rose bush. Now, the benefit of an own root rose is that pretend this is the rose bush got beautiful, right? New growth. The rose bush and the roots are the same rose, right? And so in the inclement climates, like the winter climates, especially young roses, especially own root roses. So own root roses are typically sold as 1-year-old plants, whereas bare root roses are sold as 2-year-old plants. And they arrive, and again, this is no discredit to any growers, but they arrive small. And I'm gonna use a word, spindly, okay? Like very thin. Like I'm talking thin. Like this is thick. This is thicker than most of those plants arrive. And so if a gardener puts out in an area that freezes, if they put out or it has deer and the deer eat the plant down to the ground, that rose in theory is going to push new growth because the roots match the top of the plant, right? The soil's here, the roots are down here, the plant's up here, the roots match the top. If this plant dies all the way back, okay, pretend like in the winter it dies back or a deer eat it down to the ground, these roots are going to push, because they are the same from the top to bottom, a new plant. How long that takes, who knows, right? Like that's a lot of patience. For me, I probably would just like replace the rose, because that's me, because roses like aren't that expensive. Try buying hydrangeas, right? Like I'm looking at hydrangeas right now and they're like, for a 1 gallon hydrangea is $120. I'm just like, oh my God. I could buy a lot of roses for that. So I could buy like 2.5 to 3 roses for that. So the benefit of own root roses is in those climates, definitely, that have frost, have dieback, winter dieback, have deer, have any reason that the plant could die back to the ground, that plant should regrow the same as it was. But here's the issue. Own root roses typically arrive to the consumer, the gardener, pretty small. And so they'll plant those roses in spring or summer, right? And so the likelihood though of that rose getting through the winter, that first winter in like those colder zones, like even into 7, I'm gonna say, zone 7 is a little sketchier because the plant is less mature. It doesn't have doesn't have hardly any hardwood usually. Hardwood is like the hardwood on the rose bush, like the plants that we're shipping, is typically very green, and it's much more susceptible to dying back because it's younger than a grafted bare root rose. A grafted bare root rose is gonna arrive to the gardener typically with some hardwood, and it's just gonna be a bigger, more vigorous rose. Yes, own root roses catch up with grafted roses in 2 or 3 years, or 4 or 5. I mean, I hear gardeners tell me all the time that their own root roses that they buy as 1-year-old take 5 years to catch up with a grafted rose. So if you're willing to put in the time and wait and have, kind of nurse those plants to maturity, own root roses are great, especially in climates where your roses are more susceptible to dieback. But the negative of it is that own root roses also will need more winter protection, right? Those first 1 or 2 years in the ground, or they'll need to be in pots and brought into the garage in the winter because they are far more susceptible to having that dieback. So all that growth that you put on during the growing season, and a lot of those growing seasons are very short because they're in colder areas. They don't have the growing season I have, where quite literally my roses grow 12 months of the year. They don't flower 12 months of the year, but they're constantly growing, right? Because I'm in Southern California and we have, very mild weather here. So a gardener can wait, they can grow that plant out from this to this in one season, right? And then they could lose a lot of it in the winter if they don't provide proper winter protection. So a lot of people in these colder areas are like, own root, I want own root roses, which I totally get. But those roses are also going to have to be nursed and like provided more care, especially in the winter, because they are less mature. And you're not going to get, for those of us that like instant gratification, your garden's going to take longer to fill in. So there are a lot of people, myself included, like I moved into this property 2 years ago and I'm like, I want it to be full and lush, and I don't want to see the ground. I want my roses to cover the ground, and I want like that. I don't want to wait 5 years, right? I'm waiting 5 years to renovate my kitchen and build a carriage house, but I don't want to wait 5 years for my garden, or 4 years, or 3. Like, I want fast growing plants that are gonna, you know, look amazing in my garden right away. And I'm in zone 10, so pretty much anything I put outside is gonna grow fast. But my own root roses, which I own many, and I do patronize all of the own root growers because they grow roses that I can't necessarily find other places. So I'm not knocking them at all. I am a customer. I'm a diehard customer, but they don't have the maturity or the fast growth that the grafted roses have, even in my climate, zone 10. Okay, this is my experience. But the benefit to own root roses is, like, the plant is very healthy from root to top, right? It is the same. A lot of commercial growers, my grower included, are moving more to own root roses. As far as Grace Rose Farm, we are going to have both. So our intention with our business is to have a year-round potted business. So anybody can go on our website any time of the year. I mean, you'd probably be a fool if you did it in Minnesota in December and decided to put it outside, which we wouldn't advise. But you can go onto our website any time of the year and you can buy a potted rose, right? That's our intention. And it can be either grafted or own root. It's gonna take us a few years to get there because propagation is, you know, 1 turns into 10 and 10 turns into 100 and 100 turns into 2,000 and 2,000 turn into 20,000. You know, it's like there's a staging process with plant propagation. But, and then we'll have a bare root program, which will be, you know, plants will be for sale in the fall and delivered during bare root season, which is now. And we're hoping to have also own root and grafted options. Not every rose will come own root though, because there are a lot of roses that should not be sold own root. They just don't have the vigor. Like, they need the vigor from that healthy rootstock, that vigorous rootstock, to push a beautiful plant. For instance, Julia's Rose. I own root Julia's Rose and I own grafted Julia's Rose. It's a crappy plant both ways, right? It's just unique, and like florists really liked it. It's a stingy rose. It's a spindly plant. It's not a big, beautiful, full bush. It's never gonna be, even grafted. Own root, forget it. Like, it's pretty much trash to me. Like, my own root ones are just, I don't even go there. Like, I just have no, you know, they're just not good plants. They're spindly and stingy and all the things. But my grafted ones are slightly better, but there are roses out there that just shouldn't be own root. Like, if you want a nice, beautiful, full bush that's gonna produce a lot of flowers, which I think is the objective of most gardeners. There are some like diehards that are like, well, I don't care if it like is attractive or not, I just want this rose. The bush is attractive, I just want this rose and I want it own root. I'm like, fine, like, that's you, you know, like, that's what you want. But for me, like, I want a beautiful shrub, right, that's full and lush and you don't see the spindly canes inside, and I want a lot of flowers. Like, if I'm gonna put the effort into growing it, I want it to be a beautiful bush and have beautiful flowers, and a lot of them. So our intention is to have a potted program that people can go on our website, order 365 days of the year, and then a bare root program that'll be in the fall for winter and spring delivery, and to have both own root and grafted options of both. So the benefit of grafted roses is you do get a much more established plant from the get-go. So, you know, it comes with some hardwood, you stick that thing in the ground and it's gonna grow really fast that first season. You can cut blooms from it that first season, and quite a few of them, even in like a shorter growing season climate. And, you know, I don't have a problem with them. Like, honestly, I don't. But I also don't have winter dieback. I don't have deer. I don't have some of the issues that some other gardeners have. So I'm purely explaining from my point of view. But those other gardeners that have winter dieback, they also run the risk with own root roses, right, to lose more of that plant in the winter because it is less mature. So they're gonna have to provide some winter protection or bring it into the garage. Like, it's just a little bit more hand-holding to get the plant to maturity. So it's really, a lot of these rose people in the rose forums here on Facebook have a lot of opinions about own root and grafted and this and that, and I don't really share my opinion about it. I'm sharing it here. But as far as our roses, we're gonna be making a concerted effort to have both own root and grafted options. And we will have the potted program, and we will be in nurseries around the country as well. That is a big, big goal of mine, because I wanna go and I wanna meet you all, right? Like I wanna go, and in the spring, I want to try to hit, 40 or 50 nurseries around the country. Probably will be in like the major, like Phoenix, Chicago, Boston, like the more centralized locations where more people can come. But New York, somewhere in Connecticut, a lot of gardeners in Connecticut, outside of Seattle, outside of Portland. I want to meet you all, and I want to talk about our roses, and I want to provide that level of, just availability and transparency. And that's why I formed this group, honestly. Like, I know I'm a vendor, but I'm also like tried and true, I'm a rose gardener. And that's why we really like revamped our business to go back to what we love. And what we love is, Brian and I love, well, now we have Serafina, but we loved spending time outside beautifying our property. Like, it was all to me about how can I make my property be a representation of who I am. Like, I think when I pass a house, when I'm driving and I'm like, oh, that's a pretty garden, I know that they don't have mow and blow gardeners. I know that somebody that lives in that house really loves gardening and loves flowers. They may not love gardening, but they want like a gorgeous property, and they want cut flowers to bring in, and that's who they are. Like, that's their soul, right? Is like they want this beautiful surroundings, and I love to be surrounded by beauty all the time. It's super important to me. So, because it makes me feel good, right? It makes me feel prettier myself. It makes me just, I could never imagine living on a property that like just had like stock landscape plants and palms or something and rock, and God forbid, AstroTurf. Oh my God, sorry to anybody that has AstroTurf. In California, they're all trying to get us to move over to AstroTurf, and I'm just like, not happening here. Like, literally not happening here. I will collect rainwater all winter before I will pull out my grass, because no way, not as a gardener, I can't do that. I know in like some of the, like in Phoenix and other climates, they've had to do that, but here I'm holding out. So anyway, my objective is like to always be available, like total availability, create beautiful content that is approachable. Because in the end, like, I've built a brand for Grace Rose Farm, but I'm just a rose gardener. Like, I'm honestly just like a girl. I don't have a botany degree. I don't have a horticultural degree. I'm not a breeder. I'm just a girl who wanted a beautiful backyard when she bought her first home with her husband 8 years ago. And that's what I did. And I fell in love. I always loved roses before. I had container roses in New York, New Jersey, and my condos in California. But like, I really, really, really fell in love with gardening and roses at our home 8-9 years ago. And that's how I got here. Like, that's literally how I got here. Is like, I never had an intention to like start a rose business or become a rose farmer, or cut rose. Like, I just loved roses, and I just like fell into this. And so I always want to be approachable, and I want to be accessible for people. And that's why I formed this group. That's why I answer all these questions. That's why I answer questions multiple times, because people don't see my answers the first time. I just want this to be a place like that we learn from each other. Because like, look, I'm not an expert on everything. Like, I say full transparency, we hardly have any pests here in California. I can't help you with Japanese beetles, right? Like, I don't have Japanese beetles. I have some other pests that are not so nice, but so that's where I rely upon some of you to bring in your expert knowledge. Like, if you're a Southern gardener, or you're a Pacific Northwest gardener, or a Texan, where it's hot and humid, all those things. So I think this will be fun. I'm gonna do a part 4, and I'm gonna make, I'm just gonna like start making some of my arrangements. So this is already 20 minutes, so I better go.